Gillian Lacey-Solymar is a successful businesswoman and journalist, formerly business and economics correspondent at the BBC. At the age of 48, she was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease and has been living with it for 12 years. The neurodegenerative illness has many side effects, but one that Gillian didn't anticipate was a burst of creativity in which she's written and staged a new musical called Irrepressible at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. A woman from today travels back in time to become embroiled in the tumultuous love of Admiral Nelson's mistress, Emma Hamilton. The debut performance will take place tomorrow, and here's a sneak preview from the dress rehearsal.
Scandal, sex and rock and roll. Here's your chance, don't miss it.
You'll just be a tiny little footnote of my history. A threesome, what a sordid game. All decent readers should complain.
Marry me.
Yes, my darling. Yippee.
We cannot be divided, our fates strictly elided. I love you,
Me and you.
you and me.
And also me.
And I let her go.
Ultimate sacrifice.
Onwards to the past.
I'm delighted to say that Gillian joins me from Edinburgh now. Good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for coming on GB News. You must be extremely excited about the inauguration of the piece tomorrow. Was I right in saying...
Extremely terrified.
Was I right in saying that creativity was an unexpected outcome or symptom or whatever of your illness?
Absolutely right. I didn't expect it at all. When I was diagnosed, I'd never heard of this creativity element of it. And it's not that common, it has to be said, but it's not a side effect of the illness, but it's a side effect of the drugs, actually. But I've been on these drugs for years and years, and at first they did nothing, really. Well, no, that's not true. They did help where they were supposed to help in the illness, but they did nothing on the creativity side. And then bit by bit, I started having all these ideas, which I'd never, ever had before, and generally in the middle of the night. So that was quite interesting. And then that developed more and more and more until it turned into this musical overnight.
May I ask you what made you think of Emma Hamilton, of all subjects?
It was an interesting one, that. There was an exhibition on her years and years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, in Greenwich. And my husband's very interested in Nelson. And I thought, oh, my God, it's going to be another exhibition on Nelson. And so I thought, well, I don't really want to go. And on the very last day, it was pouring with rain. And I thought, well, we may as well go. And it turned out not to be about him, but to be about Emma. And it was absolutely fascinating. You know, it showed this woman's life and how very badly she'd been treated by the press, well, by everyone, by society as well. How much she had achieved from nowhere. She came from nowhere. She was incredibly poor. And then she made it not only to be Nelson's mistress, which is what she's known for, but she was in her own right trilingual. She was an ambassadress in her own right when her husband Sir Hamilton, was struggling with the whole issue of being an ambassador himself. He was so much her senior. And, you know, we don't know her for her remarkable talent. We only know her as Nelson's mistress, which seems so desperately unfair.
On her mistreatment, Nelson wrote from the Admiral's cabin of Victory on the night before the Battle of Trafalgar, at which he was killed, saying that that Emma and his child, the child by Emma and him, should both be invited to his state funeral, and of course neither was. Let's go slightly more broadly. You've also been participating in a podcast, and this seems to have been very significant for those who've participated in it. Tell me a little bit about that, please, Gillian.
Yeah, no, it is significant, but not just for those who've participated in it. I think it's been significant for those who've listened to it as well. So the people participating are almost all ex-BBC, except for one chap who's a High Court judge, or at least he was until 2 days ago when he retired. And so, yes, it's quite a sort of high-powered bunch of people, I suppose. So the ex-BBC lot, I'm sure you'll be familiar with, are Jeremy Paxman, who's no doubt given you a grilling from time to time, Michael. Then there is Mark Mardell, also from the BBC, Rory Catlin-Jones, Paul Mayhew Archer, who wrote The Vicar of Dibley, and it's hilarious. And then there's me. So I'm the only woman there, which was quite daunting at first, I have to tell you, because all these alpha males, the moment there was a second silence, bush, they all came in and filled it. So that was quite scary. And in the first few episodes, you don't hear my voice at all, other than saying, or excuse me, I think, but by the third episode, I'd learnt my lesson there. Just carry on and keep talking.
Now, the title is Movers and Shakers. Obviously, there's a pun in there. Shaking, obviously, is one of the symptoms that you have to cope with. What is the purpose of the podcast? What is it doing for all of you? You're talking about the illness and the way that you're living with it. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, it's filmed in a pub, and we used to meet in a pub and have a chat, just us. And then we thought, in fact, it was the judge, Nick Mostyn, Sir Nicholas Mostyn, I should say, who thought initially that this could be used more widely. And he was the one who pushed for the podcast. And he was absolutely right to do so, because the effect it's had is just tremendous. What's happened is that the families often who couldn't talk about it at all, about the illness, is quite interesting. Now sit down, they listen to the podcast on a Saturday, and then afterwards they discuss the issues that come out of it. And the letters we've had and the correspondence we've had suggests that really it's had a very big impact on people's lives.
You've mentioned a galaxy of stars from the BBC there who are sufferers from Parkinson's disease. This is presumably telling us that the spread of the disease is very wide, that there are many people affected by it. Do you have any idea of that number at your fingertips?
I think it's 135,000, is it, in the UK? Something like that, I think. Maybe 150,000, around that number. But the problem is it's increasing. It's very rapidly increasing, and they don't really know why. They don't really understand very much about the disease. And it's rather depressing that really the main medication I'm on is the same medication that my grandmother was on. You know, I have the genetic version, it turns out, and not much has changed really in 60 years. But I think things are coming, or at least I'm hopeful.
And tell me what your hopes are for Irrepressible, which premieres tomorrow.
My hopes for Irrepressible are that it will go to the West End. I hope that's not a ridiculous thing to say, but the actors are so talented. The directors are also fantastic. It's staged beautifully, as you can see there. And I think it has all the elements of a success, but then I'm only the writer, so I can't really be too pro. I need to be a little bit objective as well, and I know how terribly difficult it is to get to the West End these days. You know, theatre has suffered so much since COVID, but nonetheless, let me be bold. West End first, Broadway second, and global domination third.
Congratulations on your burst of creativity that has led to this. Very best wishes with the piece and with the podcast as well. Gillian Lacey-Solymar.